Give us your take today. It's a constantly changing story, but it really was a lot of upheaval over the last week. It seems to have calmed down. Is that a false dawn?
Well, I do think the circuit breaker has been thrown on the most recent cycle of escalation between Iran and the United States, but I think we would be foolish to think that this is over. The fundamental issues that the United States and Iran are in conflict over have not gone away. So I think what we're likely to see is a reversion to sort of previous approaches. We've heard that the Trump administration is going to go ahead and increase sanctions, sort of doubling down on their maximum pressure campaign. And for Iran's part, I think you can expect them to revert to their traditional playbook, which is really using more covert and clandestine means that give them some measure of deniability, whether it's cyber attacks or whether it's use of proxies to launch attacks on their behalf. Those are the kinds of things we're going to see in the future, unless we see some kind of breakthrough that gets the parties back into negotiations, and I don't see any sign of that as yet.
So, Michelle, thanks for that setup. A curious question, or question on my part, is markets are very focused on headline risk. Right now, I think there's a general sigh of relief. If, in fact, the Iranians go back to more covert activities, it may be that nothing will be visible and markets will therefore be pretty calm. So what's the possibility that the Iranians will do something over the next few weeks, months, that will really roil markets because it will be surprising, it will be large, it will be visible, and it will be clearly a direct challenge to the United States position?
I think that's possible because, you know, where the red line has now been drawn is the killing of Americans. So I think Iran understands that. But, you know, I don't think it's out of the question that we could see another attack on either oil tankers in the Gulf or oil infrastructure in the region that would rattle the markets, because I think Iran understands that our partners in the region are vulnerable. You know, they could certainly take advantage of that and launch attacks against that infrastructure again if they felt they weren't getting the right attention from the Europeans, from the U.S. They weren't getting support to try to lessen the sanctions on them, which have been crippling.
Taking out Soleimani was a choice, Michelle, that President Bush rejected and that President Obama rejected, and it's a choice that President Trump made. Are we more or less secure as Americans today with him dead, but the consequences of our having engaged for the first time in 40 years, 50, 70 years, in assassination of the senior official of another government? Would you say Americans are more or less secure today as a consequence of what's happened?
Look, he was a terrible man with the blood of hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans and many others on his hands. So in that sense, he was a legitimate target. But I think other presidents had the opportunity, decided not to take him out because of the second and third order strategic consequences of doing so. He was not only the head of a designated terrorist organization, he was also arguably the second most powerful Iranian government official. And so what this has done has basically now set the precedent of assassinating a government official of a country with whom we are not formally at war. So what is to stop Iran from assassinating a four-star U.S. general or a National Security Council member when they next visit the region? It sets a terrible precedent. It opens a Pandora's box on assassination. Furthermore, the way in which it was done on Iraqi soil, without any coordination with the Iraqis, has now set off a set of issues there where we may very well get pushed out of Iraq, and at a time when we still have work to be done with our allies in terms of fighting ISIS and making sure that they do not regenerate and start attacking U.S. interests and facilities around the region.
So, Michelle, this is Roger again. Is there any path forward here? I mean, is this really two tarantulas in a jar fighting each other. If you were in government again, what would your white paper be about where we go from this highly unusual place?
I think what we need to do is go back to first principles. What are our objectives? What is our strategy? You can't just use coercive measures, tactical coercive measures like sanctions and like military action without understanding what are they in service of, what is the strategy. I think we need to try to get back to a negotiating table that includes not only Iran, but a number of our regional partners, to try to negotiate a deal that would constrain Iranian nefarious activity in the region and their nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. That is the deal that has to be had. And I haven't seen any sign of that diplomatic initiative. I haven't seen any serious effort to construct what that deal would look like. We've seen an exhaustive, kind of very ambitious list of objectives that Secretary Pompeo has put out there. But it's everything, that we could possibly imagine. It's not a serious negotiating strategy. So I would like to see us get back to that. Frankly, right now, I don't think Iran's going to be very open to that, given what's just been happening. I think this latest cycle has set back the prospect for any serious negotiation in the short term. But I do hope we get there in the long term.